the value of the culture in our programs can also be reinforced through how we empower the kids in the actual learning process and how we create environments of respect and safety through our regular instruction. That it can be embedded in the work that we're doing daily with our kids, and that it doesn't have to be. I mean, it can be a separate conversation, but it can and should be integrated right into how we're teaching.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer and educator, and each week I have the good fortune to speak with and share the stories and wisdom of musicians and leaders in the band community. The Everything Band podcast is a proud member of the Music Teachers Development Podcast Network. The Muted Network provides support in the form of audio-on-demand programming designed by and for music educators. You can find more information about our network at mutedpodcasts.com. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you for listening. I appreciate your time and hope that you are finding value from these interviews. I rely on word of mouth and social media to bring the show to new listeners. If you think you knew one or two people who might find these interviews useful, please let them know about it. You can also help by following me and sharing posts on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and YouTube. Remember, help your students live up to the best that is in them through music. And now on to my next guest, Jonathan Grantham. Hi, Jonathan.
Hi, Mark.
Thanks for joining me this morning. It is the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, and we're both on vacation.
And I am so happy.
Well, are you really on vacation, though, Jonathan, with all that's coming up in the next month?
I have made an effort this week to actually take some time to rest and relax. And so I am going to be on a proper vacation more than I am not this week.
Excellent. So for all the listeners, I'll have Jonathan introduce himself, but his band is performing at Midwest on Friday. That's going to be at noon. And so make sure if you're in Chicago next month to check them out. So Jonathan, now that I've said that, can you introduce yourself formally for the listeners?
Sure. Hi, my name is Jonathan Grantham, and I'm the director of bands at Amador Valley High School in Pleasanton, California, which is located within the Bay region, San Francisco Bay region of California.
And so, Jonathan, can you tell everyone your origin story? How did you get into music as a child?
I have my mom to thank for that. My mom was a musician in middle school and high school. She went to Interlochen in the summertime. She was quite a good flute and piccolo player. And when I was leaving the fifth grade in our school district in Michigan, we started beginning band in the sixth grade. So when I was leaving fifth grade, we did our spring assessments with a music store to see if we had a certain leaning towards good oral skills or good rhythmic awareness, and began the initial kind of round of placing people on instruments. And so I went home and talked to my mom about it, because I think, as often is the case, a lot of my friends were doing it. And she gave me a really lovely nudge and piece of encouragement and said, I'm not going to force you to do anything, but it was something that I really enjoyed a lot, and I think you should give it a try. And I did. And I think that worked out okay.
So was that the summer musical aptitude test? Do you remember?
I don't remember the name of it. I do remember sitting in our cafeteria with all of the fifth graders that wanted to do band the next year. And there were a series of beeps that we heard. And then we had to it was almost like a hearing test with an audiologist, where you had to kind of identify if the second beep was higher or lower than the first beep. And that's the only recollection I have of that particular test.
Yeah, I was very young too. I started in fourth grade, and that was in the 70s. So I have a vague recollection of that. I'm sure that there's a more experienced listener out there who knows these tests and might chime in later and tell me what this is. But I seem to recall that same thing. It's just sort of caught my attention when you said that aptitude test. Okay, so how about what's your instrument?
I'm a trombone player.
Trombone. And so why the trombone? Do you know?
So I actually wanted to play the trumpet because my best friend in middle school was going to play the trumpet. And when I went in to get fitted by the music store representative, I tried a trumpet. And at that point, I didn't have orthodontia and I have quite full lips, and my teeth were really, really crooked. And I wasn't really able to produce a sound on the trumpet. And so the music store representative kind of coached me and said, this is something you could do, but you might really struggle with it. How would you feel about trying the trombone? And it looked similar enough. And so I gave it a go and I could make a sound on it. And he said, there you go. You should play the trombone. And that's how that happened.
It's interesting. I had a similar experience. My best friend wanted to play the trumpet, and I ended up playing the trumpet, and I think I probably should have been on trombone. All these years later, I think I'm a repressed low brass player.
It's funny that you say that because I love the trombone, and it has brought me many, many wonderful experiences. I think I'm actually a repressed woodwind player. I am not, and I mean this with all due respect and love to my trombone brethren that are listening. I've been told repeatedly I'm not a typical trombone player. I was always the one in the section that was like, we're at measure 7. Yes, you can borrow my pencil. The concert's at 7:30. So I kind of joke that I was probably more like a clarinet or a bassoon personality who wound up in the back row. But I think that ultimately helped me to be a better teacher because I know what happens in the back of the room.
I was definitely a brass player the whole way. I don't think my personality would have worked for woodwind, at least not as a child and teenager anyway.
Yeah.
I might make a better saxophone player now, but not then. So, Jonathan, tell me about those early years then in the band. Did you play in your middle school band, and what was that like? And then how about the transition into high school and that experience?
Yeah, it's an interesting story. I did obviously play all through middle school, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. And funny aside, the lowest grade I've gotten, 6th all the way through master's degree program, was a C+ in my first 9 weeks of middle school band because I didn't practice enough. So that worked out okay in terms of me being motivated by that C+, that first report card of my 6th grade band experience. I grew up in a small kind of farming blue collar community in central Michigan called Chesaning. And at the time that I was in middle school, which would have been in the mid 80s, the program was a little small. I think by the time I was in 8th grade, there were 25 or 28 kids in my 8th grade band. And we had a really good middle school band teacher in terms of how he got the groups to sound and play well. But a lot of kids felt disconnected from kind of the daily experience of what it meant to be in band. And there wasn't always a lot of endearing and kind of loving energy around just the experience of being in that classroom. And so when I went on to high school, I actually wasn't going to continue. And I think my mom stepped in again and gave me just a little nudge and said, I think that classic parent line, try it for a year. And if you don't like it, you can quit. And so I was like, okay. 2 of my very best friends were going on to play in band. And so I thought, well, I've got some people I know, so I'll do that. And so my middle school band experience laid the foundation for me to develop good skills, but I don't think necessarily had me loving band. And I stayed with it for friends and at the encouragement of my mom. And I made it through my 9th grade year, and I had a nice time in band in high school. And because it was a small school, it was the same director that did 6th through 12th grade. And so I had the same teacher in the 9th grade. He left after my 9th grade year, and that's when everything changed for me. The director that came in my 10th grade year, he was with our school for actually the duration of my high school career. His name is Bob Parker, and he stands as the largest single influence in the trajectory of my life. He's a really incredible human being, and he was the reason I wanted to go into music education.
So can you tell me a little bit more about Bob, and what was it that sort of created that feeling in you that you wanted to be a music teacher? How did that come about, I guess? I'm trying to get to that why.
Yeah. So I know we use the term kid magnet in our profession, this idea that there's just a certain personality that kids are drawn to. And he was the right person in the right place at the right time for our community. A lot of my friends and I, maybe we had parents that did not go to or did not finish college. Like I said, it was a rural agricultural blue collar town. And he was somebody who I credit for, I frame it as he took the ceiling off of our world and let us see infinitely into the sky. He made things seem possible that maybe we hadn't even considered. And I think there was just this energy about how he made us all want to be there and to be good. And he did that in a way that was so inspiring. And I don't know, I feel like there was something about, we all wanted to always be with him in the room. I have these memories of him working in the band office on summer nights, kind of arranging our marching band show music. And me and three or four of my friends would like drive into town and go see, visit with him. And this was before cell phones and things. So we were just kind of driving by the school to see if anybody was in the band room. So there he was, and we would hang out and help him do things. I think just his kids were all in, and he revitalized a band program that had fallen on some hard times, and doubled the numbers. And we achieved good success at district and state band festival and marching competitions. And I think the summation of it is I loved every part of band. I loved marching band. I loved jazz band. I loved wind ensemble. I got to be his TA my senior year, and I got to help teach the 6th grade beginning band class for a semester and conducted on the spring concert. He just gave me a lot of opportunities that to this day, some 25 to 30 years after he was my teacher, I still feel like I'm paying forward the gift that he gave me.
I had two band directors in high school, very different people, but they both had that same quality in different ways, where I just wanted to be around them. I wanted to emulate them. It's amazing what a teacher can do, what a band teacher can do.
And we spend enough time together, right? I mean, on the teacher side of things, the amount of contact minutes that we have, especially if you're doing high school and you have a competitive band program, just the amount of contact minutes that you'll spend with a student over 4 years of high school, it's huge. So the reach of that is not something I take for granted. In hindsight, it's something that I admire so deeply about what Bob did for me and for all of his students.
Yeah, that timepiece is interesting, and we still have more of your story to tell, but maybe we can talk about this first while we're here. I don't have a lot of high school band directors. In 138 episodes, I haven't had many high school band directors on the show, and it's because I find that it's difficult to schedule high school directors. You're so busy. I mean, relative to everyone else in the music education community, and that time commitment, but we don't talk about that very much. And so I don't know where I'm heading with this, Jonathan, or if there's a point to my statements right now. But,
sure.
I think a lot of us, we aspire to the lower levels as we get through our careers because of that timepiece. But it's so invaluable for the students what high school directors give back to the band.
I know I found that was true for me as a student in high school. And I just feel very, very passionately about the need for strong guiding hands for teenagers. And I have mad respect for elementary music teachers and middle school music teachers. I feel like everybody has to find a lane that they can stay in and be successful. And for me, I've done middle school honor bands, my first job in Michigan. I taught elementary school students as well. And I feel like high school kids, it's just where I feel like I resonate the most. And, I've been asked several times in the course of the latter half of the course of my career about, do you think you might go on to do other things? And I kind of was at a crossroads several years ago where I kind of thought maybe I should be going on to do work at the collegiate level, and just realized I really like being at the high school level. I love working with high school kids. I love the depth of relationships you get to build over years. And it feels like where I belong.
Jonathan, you mentioned Bob Parker, and you talked about how he inspired you. And I love this line about took the ceiling off of our world and let us see infinitely into the sky. That's a terrific line. How did that manifest itself going into college and becoming a music educator? Where did you go to school, and how did you take his lessons forward?
I went to Central Michigan University, and I was definitely not somebody that was going the performance route and had music education kind of as my backup. I went in knowing that I wanted to be a band teacher, and I took my playing very seriously. At that time, they had performance minors as an option. So, I did several recitals in college and was very committed to improving my craft on my instrument, but knew in my heart of heart and all of my pursuits were leading me towards music education. And, I had dreams and goals about what I wanted to do and where I wanted to be. None of them involved being in California at that time, honestly. But my college experience was all about setting the stage for me to be an effective music educator. I taught private lessons. I worked with a local marching band. I actually was in winter guard in high school because I wanted to learn how to do color guard. So if I was going to be a high school band director, I would at least understand color guard, and ended up being a color guard coach for competitive color guard while I was in college. So just found all of these different ways to really kind of have a nice full range of experience outside of my coursework so that I would be fully equipped to hopefully be ready to do the job when I graduated.
Was anyone advising you on these things? Did anyone say, hey, you should do winter guard so you learn color guard? Or was that your own decision?
It was my own decision. I mean, it looked fun. So I was like, I want to try that. And I was one of those kids that was busy. I was busy because I liked doing lots of things, and being in a small high school, lots of kids had to do lots of things for all of those things to exist.
Yeah, I just last week I spoke with Keith Hudson, who mentioned that there was no marching band at his university, so he joined DCA so that he would have marching band experience. And so it's interesting that you did winter guard, this ability to look into the future as a college student to say, okay, this is what I need. I find that really interesting.
It has paid off dividends many times over, being in the press box, running an ensemble rehearsal, and being able to speak. We have a very qualified color guard staff, but being able to offer occasional ensemble commentary to the color guard and to be able to use language and vocabulary that makes sense to them because I speak that language also. It has proven to be an invaluable decision.
Yeah, I bet. Do you have any advice, maybe if there's a music ed student who's listening in their degree that to sort of to plan out what they might be able to do? Or is this something that maybe is just personal?
The advice I would offer is if time affords you this, and that's a tough ask given, I think, the world that college students are living in now is different than the one I was living in 25 years ago. I mean, I did have to pay my way through college, and I worked a full-time job while I was a music ed student waiting tables. So I was very busy trying to juggle many plates simultaneously, but I just knew that at the end of the day, I wanted to make sure that I was seeking, creating, and finding opportunities for myself that would just make me a better teacher before I started teaching. And to the extent that any undergraduate music ed student is listening and can hear any advice that I would have to offer, it would be that is to create opportunities for yourself, big and small, when you're able to just give yourself as much experience as you can before you're on your own.
Remember your first term of teaching? Learning all the skills that you don't get taught in music school, managing a transitioning culture in your classroom, finding out that you have to teach guitar this term? During those early years, we found out that leaning on a community of music educators was important, not only for building that knowledge in ourselves, but also maintaining enough sanity to serve the students right in front of us. Amused is a podcast centered around a community of music teachers. Between the four of us, we teach choir, band, orchestra, general, jazz, and marching band at the elementary through collegiate levels. We certainly don't have all the answers, but you're welcome to listen in while we try to find them. Join us while we work through the challenges of music teaching and celebrate the joy of bringing music making into the lives of young people. In each episode, you'll hear stories, both good and bad, about that week of teaching, and we'll try and tackle an issue that one of us is struggling with. Something we're all taught is that music brings people together, but being the only teacher in your subject at a site can be really isolating. We think everyone ought to be a part of a community, and you're welcome to come join ours. Episodes come out on Wednesdays during the school year, and you can find us wherever you get your podcasts and at amusedcast.org.
All right, Jonathan, how about after university? What were your first couple jobs like before you, and how did you end up in California?
So I have had such an interesting career trajectory in that I have only had 2 jobs in my career of almost 20 years now.
Oh,
wow. Out of college, I took a practice interview for a job that I knew I didn't want, but wanted to get an interview in, and they didn't offer it to me. And then I interviewed for the job I took in Michigan, and it was at Sanford Meridian Public Schools, or Meridian Public Schools in Sanford, Michigan. And I was hired out of college as the 5th through 12th grade band director. And if my memory serves me correctly, I was serving somewhere in the neighborhood of like 350 to 400 kids across all of those programs. So I have a large band at Amador for a high school program, but to be a first year teacher and to be interacting with and engaging with like 350 kids, it was a lot. The high school band was very small. I had 28 kids in the high school band, and have very fond memories. I was at Sanford Meridian for 2 years and very fond memories of my time in that program. Amazing, amazing kids. I think back fondly to a lot of the adventures that we had as a new teacher with kids who were hungry for something more in the program. There was kind of a revitalization and an energy. I'm going to make Mr. Parker a verb. I Mr. Parkered the program. And, numbers went up. We went to state festival. They got a superior rating at district marching band contest. There was just a lot of energy and momentum there that was very, very positive for me. But I had burned myself out after 2 years. And I think, so I ended up taking a break after those 2 years. I didn't think I was going to come back to teaching. And during that year off, I went back to waiting tables and moved to Metro Detroit. So Sanford Meridian is near where I went to college. So it was a small rural town, kind of like where I grew up. And so I moved to the city and just kind of took a year to figure out what I was going to do, moved in with some college friends. And in that year, decided that I actually was really missing teaching and kind of got to the point where I thought, well, maybe it wasn't that the profession wasn't a good fit. Maybe I just needed to be in a different environment. And I say that because I loved my kids, but there were some challenges with that particular, I think, campus for me, having nothing to do with my students. And I can look back on this now and realize what was going on, but in the moment I was just overwhelmed and needed to be done.
Can you share, or would you prefer not to?
Well, I don't mind sharing. I don't know how much of this you want to, I'll leave it to you to decide what you put on, and I'm comfortable with you putting everything that I'm saying on. I am a gay teacher and I am out as an educator in California, but I was not in Michigan, and truthfully experienced some verbal harassment, not from my own kids because my students were awesome, but I did experience some verbal harassment in the hallways and on campus from students that were not mine. And it just became untenable and was honestly not worth it for me to stay, having to kind of confront that. And because it was my only experience as an educator, I think in hindsight was kind of left to assume, well, this is just what it's like everywhere. and that's why I left teaching. And again, I don't mind if you share that. I'm very transparent about my story, and we'll leave it to you to decide what you'd like to include, but I'm okay if you share any of that.
I think it's an important part of the story because, I know the era you're talking about. That's the era that we're basically contemporaries. I might be a little bit older.
Yeah.
And so I remember those days. I remember what it was like. I taught at an all boys school, and it was, I would constantly have to chide students about that stuff. And I can't imagine. I can't imagine is what I'm saying, but I think it's important to talk about it. Okay. Why California? Why Pleasanton? How did that happen?
Truthfully, it was a relationship that took me to California that didn't work out as well as the job. And that's how to sum that up succinctly. And specific to the job in Pleasanton, it almost feels like manifest destiny to tell this story. But the job in Pleasanton Unified at Amador was the only job I applied for.
Wow.
I applied for one job and took a phone interview. This was in the early 2000s. So this was still when kind of HR processes, they were just starting to transition to online. So some things were digital, some things had to be mailed or faxed. So it was kind of this in-between space in terms of my hiring. I think now everything is just online, but that wasn't true at that point. So I submitted my materials, didn't hear anything for a couple of weeks. And so did the thing you're taught to do in your music ed courses. And I followed up with a phone call and talked to somebody in human resources. And this is a funny story. I had applied for the band director position at Amador Valley High School. And I could hear her literally clicking through like a filing cabinet, like moving papers on the phone. And she said, "Oh, here's your file. Oh, I see what happened. So the job is for music education or instrumental music, but you applied for band director. So I put you in a different file." And I just think if I hadn't called, I might not have ever received an interview for the job, because I put band director and it was for instrumental music, and she didn't think they were the same thing. So she didn't have my application in the folder for that job opening.
I'm sure you wouldn't have gotten that job.
Yeah. And so I had a phone interview with the superintendent of human resources, and that went well. And they offered to interview me in person. So I booked a flight and headed out to the Bay Area and had an in-person interview. This was in July, early July, and they offered me the job on site after the interview, and came back to Michigan, and we made very quick plans to load up our stuff and drive west in time for band camp.
What was it like culturally to come from Michigan and then to start teaching in Pleasanton, California? Was it a cultural difference? I know there's certainly differences in the way music education is done, or at least expectations for band is. But can you kind of explain that for the listeners?
Oh my gosh, it was so different. Growing up in and teaching in small working class communities, there was a different level of parent engagement. And also, I think the kids, I'll speak just to my own personal experience, like band for me in high school was like the thing that was my identity. And it was the thing that I had the most success at. And it was kind of where I found my reason for going to school every day. I think anecdotally, that was true for a lot of the kids that I first taught in Michigan. And when I moved to California, and Pleasanton is an affluent upper middle class suburb in the Bay Area, and it was very, very different. The resource that kids had, the engagement and involvement of the parents, I think the expectations of the parents, it was all just very different. And being in a community where band was a very high profile activity, there's another high school in town, and the director that was there at the time, he's now since retired, he'd opened that school and had been there for over 30 years. So there was kind of this legendary director at the other school. Amador had had a revolving door of teachers. So it was like teaching in a fishbowl where everybody is watching you from all sides at all times. I had people that very pointedly told me I wouldn't last 6 months because I was so young and had no experience. So it was very different. It was definitively a culture shock. Yeah.
Well, there's no question that the band community or the band world that here in St. Louis, where I am now, is way different than when I taught in California. You know, the California model, at least when I was a young student or a young teacher, it was single director at a high school. There were no assistant teachers. You know, it was a very different kind of thing than, say, what's going on in a lot of parts of the country.
Yeah, I think something I have seen evolve, specifically in the Bay region, I won't speak for California as a whole, but in the region where I teach, there is an incredibly supportive community of music educators. And specific to my world in the high school realm, I have a network of dozens of high school band directors that are supportive and helpful to one another, and not competitive in a negative or toxic way. And that the level of musicianship in so many schools and the number of students that are involved in music in this region has really changed and grown a lot in my time in this area.
Yeah. So let's talk about your current program then. What does your program look like at Amador Valley? How many bands do you have? How many students? That sort of thing.
Well, a quick bit of background. When I started at Amador in 2002, there were 130 students in the band and the color guard, and a campus of about 2,000 to 2,100 students. There was no string program and a very small choir. So it was me and one other part-time choir teacher. And I had 2 concert band classes and 2 jazz band classes and a color guard class. And that was my full-time load. Fast forward 18 years later, the campus has grown to just a little over 2,700 students. And I lead a band program of 350 students now. We have a large orchestra program and a large choral program led by a different teacher. And there's a full-time assistant director at Amador. We have 5 concert bands and 3 jazz bands. And then we have 2 winter percussion groups and 2 competitive winter guard groups, as well as a competitive marching band.
So, Jonathan, how about the bands? How is your program organized as far as where the students are playing? So I guess maybe the best way is, I asked this in another interview, is if I were an entering freshman trumpet player and I was Mark, the 9th grader, what would my progress look if I were progressing through your program?
Yeah, that's a great way to frame it. We have all of our 9th graders in a band class that we call concert band. The last 2 years, our freshman numbers have been so large. We've had over 100 9th graders join band that we have had to split our freshman concert band class. So the last 2 years, we've had a woodwind class and then a combined brass and percussion class. And prior to the last 2 years, all of the freshmen were just in an ensemble together. My freshman numbers have typically been between 70 and 85, but the last 2 years have just been atypically large. So all freshmen are in a freshman band class together. They do not audition for the top ensembles as 9th graders. And I think even though I have kids with all state level abilities and they could play in those groups, I feel very importantly about the development of kind of the cohort of the kids all together and learning the ways of the Amador band, if you will, all together as a class.
I see.
And that band, they do concerts and district band festival. It's, they have a fully engaged experience throughout the year. And all 9th graders are required to be in our competitive marching band. The marching band is not required 10th through 12th grade, though about 92% of our students choose to continue in the competitive marching band after their 9th grade year. If then a student continues on in the 10th grade and they have the option to audition for one of the 2 wind ensembles, if they choose not to audition, we have a 10th grade band for all of the students who either didn't choose or didn't make one of the wind ensembles. This year, our 10th grade band has about 72 students in it. And then we have an 11th and 12th grade non-audition band. This year, that group is about 55 kids. And those students are, I like to call them the heart and soul of the band. They are band kids with capital B, capital K. They love band. Most of those students maybe aren't taking private lessons. They may not take their horns home every day in practice, but they work hard and they really are committed. They're band kids and they're in it, I think, a lot for the group and the experience. And so that is the non-audition 11th, 12th grade band. And then we have 2 auditioned wind ensembles. And they are sequenced. So there's Wind Ensemble 2, and that the 2 groups have mirrored instrumentation. So Wind Ensemble 2 is 57, 58 students, and that's 10th through 12th grade. I call that the training ground for the top group. It's 1 or 2 on a part, and we play grade 4 to 5 literature throughout the year. And then Wind Ensemble 1 is the advanced group, and that is a small number of 10th graders. It's mostly 11th and 12th graders. And that is audition only, and that group plays grade 5, 6 literature throughout the year.
So that's the group that was accepted to Midwest this year?
Yes, and I would like to just mention on behalf of the kids in the program, this is our 2nd time performing at Midwest. I'm super proud of the kids. We performed in 2013. Wind Ensemble 1 went in 2013. And at that time, we were only, I believe, the 3rd high school concert band from California in the history of Midwest to perform at the clinic. And this time around, I think we are the 1st high school concert band from our state to be chosen twice.
So what is that process like? What was that like from the recording and then especially the news? I'm really interested to hear how the kids react to that news and what that was like.
Yeah, it was. The recording process itself is fascinating because you can do the audio in multiple takes, and the listening panel primarily assesses the audio of your performance. And then you have to do a video take so that they can ensure that it's you conducting and that it's representative of the audio that you sent in. We decided for our recording, we did John Mackey's The Frozen Cathedral, and then you have to do a march. So we did Hindemith's March from Symphonic Metamorphosis. If your listeners aren't familiar, The Frozen Cathedral is it's an almost 14-minute work, and you can't stop and like splice takes of different parts of the piece together. You have to do it as one continual recording. So the day of our recording session, we booked a local church where we do our concerts and had the professional recording company there and kids all dressed up in concert dress for the video. And we did 2 run-throughs of The Frozen Cathedral. And when we got done with we got done with both run-throughs, and the kids had error-free, we didn't have any errors on the recordings, and the kids erupted in applause at the relief of having made it through a 14-minute concentration Olympic event. The kids performed fantastically, but it is one of the most stressful things I have ever had to do.
Yeah, sure.
So I tell the kid, like, if you crack a note and measure 78, we either have to live with it or go back to the beginning and start over.
And so what was the news like when you told them?
We're fortunate in that we get to find out a little ahead of the kids. And it was a bummer because I got the news the Friday before we left for spring break. So I got the news, and then the kids went away for a week. And so I had to kind of sit on that for 8 or 9 days. The silver lining was that it gave me time to coordinate a visit from our superintendent and several of our school board members and our site administration team. And Wind Ensemble 1 meets as a 0 period each day. So it was 7:15 in the morning and the kids came in for rehearsal. And there's the superintendent and the principal, several school board members, and being able to give them the news and to watch their reactions was incredible. The kids gasped, they cheered, they gave each other hugs. Of course, it's bittersweet news for the seniors because they had given so much to the recording and they understood what was at stake for us in that process. But then also I was so taken with how generous they were and wishing their congratulations and hoping that maybe they in some way could go to Chicago to watch the band perform. And it was a really special morning.
So now what have the preparations been like?
They have been good. I will say getting to do it a second time is kind of a cool opportunity because I feel certainly a little bit calmer knowing what to expect. But also our program is 6 years stronger than it was when we went the last time. The bench is deeper, the fundamentals are more well developed. So I feel like I'm taking a group that is even better set up for success this time around. And the kids have taken the responsibility of preparing their parts and coming to rehearsal well ready to go. They've taken that responsibility very seriously. So it's made the process, I won't lie and say there haven't been moments of stress and panic and anxiety. I don't want to misrepresent it. But I would say by and large, because I trust the kids and they have shown up ready to go, we have made significant progress and rehearsals have been going well. We have done some outside of school work. We've maybe have had a half a dozen outside of school practices to prepare, and then have relied largely just on our rehearsal time during the school week to get ready for the event.
So what you are performing Friday at noon with your band, the Amador Valley High School Wind Ensemble. What's the program going to be? Can you tell us?
I can, yeah. I'm very excited. I don't want to assume that your listeners understand all of the parameters of a Midwest program, but you're required to do 50% new music that was released within the last couple of years. And you have to do 50% of your program has to be grades 1, 2, 3. So you have to have a really broad array of styles and grade levels in your program. And I also really wanted to honor kind of walking the walk, if you will, honor a lot of the really important conversations that have been happening in our profession about representation of diverse composers. So I'm also very excited about the array of diversity that we have in our program. And it's a program that's really reflective of the spirit and energy of who we are as a band, which I'm also proud of. Some of the highlights of the program, we're opening with, this will be a good test for me to see if I can remember off the top of my head what we're performing in 3 weeks. We're opening with John Jadeklick's Celebrations. We're doing a really lovely grade 1 piece by Dr. Travis Cross called Music Aurea, and a really lovely grade 1. We're doing Patrick Burns' Rhapsody for solo clarinet and wind ensemble. It was actually a piece a consortium we were a part of in 2015. And that will feature my very dear friend, Sergeant Master Brooke Emery from the United States Air Force Band. She'll be playing the solo clarinet part with us. We're doing a really fun grade 2 piece called Court Jester March by Karen Robinson. I may be going out of order now, but that's okay. We're doing Julie Giroux's The Ash Grove, which is a piece that she wrote, originally was working on as a retirement commission for Dr. Eric Hammer, the director of bands at the University of Pacific. And Dr. Hammer passed away suddenly and tragically before he was to retire and before that piece was realized with him conducting it. And so she went on to finish the commission, and it ended up being an in memoriam for Dr. Hammer. So we're going to be performing that at Midwest. And Dr. Hammer was a friend, colleague, and mentor of mine, so the very special connection there. We're doing David Maslanka's California, which for me was an awesome inclusion in the program, given that we are a band from California. Kate Nishimura's piece called Autumn, and a really lovely grade 3 lyrical piece. Carl King's The Big Cage. We're closing with the 4th movement from Pineapple Paul. And I feel like there's one other piece that I'm forgetting, so you'll have to find the 10th piece on the program.
Well, all my listeners are going to be there to hear it, right?
Yes, I hope so.
So, Jonathan, I'm looking forward to this performance at Midwest. You're also giving a clinic at 3 p.m. that same day. Can you talk about that?
I am excited to share with 2 of my very dear friends, Doctors Jessica Von Mera and her husband, Chris Mera. And the 3 of us are going to be presenting a session on building and maintaining culture in large ensembles. And it's intended to be both for middle school and high school. We're all coming at it through the lens of band directing, but it, I think, could easily be applicable to string teachers as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a really interesting topic. I'd like to see that one.
It's something that I realized, sometimes young teachers will ask me, if there's anything you could go back and do over again, what would you do? And really the thing that I always come back to is to be more intentional and more explicit earlier on about the importance of who we are over what we do.
Yeah. Can you explain that?
Yeah, I feel like I've always, as a young teacher and a mid-career teacher, I felt like I was clear with the kids about expectations of, how we handle ourselves and having a degree of professionalism and, being kind to one another. But I always felt like it was either in one of 2 categories. Like, we're going to talk about it at the beginning of the year, like it's part of our syllabus, and then it's one and done. Or it's in response to something that has happened. Like, there was bullying, there was harassment, there was an inappropriate comment that was made, and then we have to have a big talk as a program. And as I started to connect the dots more consciously, I realized, and this is kind of my, I wrote a blog post about this. I call it cultural hygiene. Like, we don't put deodorant on in August and say we're good until June. So why would we expect that we could talk about behavior and expectations once at the beginning of the year and assume that the kids are going to be okay to just handle that throughout the rest of the year? Yeah, I think being more explicit and clear with the students throughout the course of the year about the fact that who we are is something that we're continually working on and continually resetting and reminding ourselves about what it means to be a contributing member of the program, and that the people are more important than the process, are more important than the product, like kind of prioritizing in that order. And that's always the thing that I tell young teachers. You're going to have so much on your plate, but make sure that how the students are caring for one another and how that shows up in your daily instruction is a priority in what you're considering day to day in your teaching.
So, Jonathan, we have talked for quite a while about your program and your background. Is there anything to summarize your experiences that you'd like to share with the listeners that maybe they can take with them?
I think if I had any kind of reflective thoughts to sum up, for me, It has been a journey to find a balance in my life in terms of living honestly and truthfully, and how that shows up in my music making and my teaching, and the integration and truthfully the decompartmentalization of my life. The more fully integrated I have become as a person and showing up who I am everywhere I go has meant more deeply enriching teaching experiences and more deeply and enriching music making with my students.
Hello, my name is Bryce Adams. I teach band at North Kitsap High School in Paulsbo, Washington. I'm commissioning Garrett Hope to compose a 4-movement suite for grade 3 band. Garrett Hope's music is exciting, it's accessible, the kids love it, it's fun to play. This piece will be inspired by the 4 winds from Greek mythology, each one having different character and style. The music will be delivered on November 1st, 2020. The first movement, Boreas, is already written, published, and available. I invite you to join a consortium with me to help bring this music to life. The best benefit to joining this consortium is the amazing deal. The buy-in for this project is only $250. You will receive the music for all 4 movements, totaling about 16 minutes worth of music. I would invite everyone to join the consortium. Supporting new music by living composers is what keeps our art alive. Garrett and I will both be at Midwest this year if you'd like to talk about this opportunity. You can find us at the TPC Collective booth. To join this consortium, go to garretthope.com/wins. That's wins with an S.
Jonathan, let's get on to these final group of questions that I ask all the guests.
I like these rapid fire. These are fun.
Well, except it's kind of like not the lightning round, it's the molasses round.
Okay. Let's do the molasses round. I'm all in.
The first of these questions: where do you draw the line between healthy and unhealthy competition in music?
This is a great question because we just finished our competitive marching season. We go late in California because weather is better here. And we did not have the competitive outcome that we were expecting based on how the earlier part of our season went. And I was so proud of the kids because, we have a healthy conversation in our program about how competition can serve us, specifically in marching band. We're not competitive in the concert arena. But this idea that competition can serve to move us forward if we're working first and foremost to compete against our own standard that we set for ourselves. And I think for me, the line that I draw is when the win compromises the community. And if you're prioritizing winning or beating other groups over the preservation and protection of the community of your own program, then I think things are out of balance.
All right, Jonathan. So this is a question that many music educators struggle with. And over the time of doing the podcast, I've come to realize that, what I believe is a healthy balance isn't someone else's healthy balance. But for you, how have you found a work-life balance in your career?
I have found one, I'm happy to report, despite the grueling hours, especially of the fall, and with the support, especially of a very patient and loving partner, it makes it easier to manage. And for any younger teachers that are listening, please know that this is sometimes designed by discovery, finding work-life balance, that it was not like this for me early on. But the longer you do something, you get more efficient. You get better. For me, work-life balance has stemmed from a few decisions. One is to create really healthy boundaries for myself so that I'm not answering emails when I'm not at school. I am not bringing work home. I will occasionally bring scores home to study because that for me is like reading. Like I find that actually very calming. So for me, score prep and doing harmonic analysis and things like that, I actually find that very relaxing, and I don't think of that as work, even though it is work. So that's kind of the one asterisk of work that I'll bring home sometimes. I've learned to leave things unfinished at school, and that's okay. I'm a type A- personality, I like to say, and I'm really embracing the minus part of that by leaving some things unfinished and not feeling like I have to just work until it's all done, because there'll always be something. I think for me, finding activities outside of music, because music for me is both a hobby and a job, and being a band director is a fairly consuming pursuit of passion. So finding other activities, for me, cycling and running, yoga, physical things. I've very recently gotten into mindfulness and meditation, which has been very helpful. Just things that keep me kind of calm and centered, and spending time with friends who aren't. To any of my music teacher friends that are listening, I love you, but I also try to find balance in my life by spending time with people socially who aren't music educators.
Otherwise, you talk about band the whole time.
That is correct. And I have a whole network of friends that I call. I have like a band director friend I call if I have a bad day. I have a band director friend I call if I've had a good day. I have, it's like I have a different director for every prescriptive need. But sometimes it's nice to just go out and not have to worry about being on. And so I'm also appreciative. My partner is not a music teacher. He is not a musician. I love that when I come home after a day, it's glad you had a good day. Will you clean the litter box? It's like there's not really a need for me to have to continue my day as a band teacher. When I get home, I get to time out, which is really healthy.
All right, Jonathan, this is a big question. What are the challenges facing music education and band, and how can we best meet them?
Through the lens in which I teach, and I always want to couch a response to a question like this, in that I'm speaking to the world that I know best, and it is teaching, in a fluent community, in a very affluent region of the country. Kids are stressed. Kids are stretched really thin. They're tired, and so I think the mental wellness piece, we've made a concerted effort on our campus to prioritize wellness and mindfulness as part of what we're doing in all of our classrooms across the campus. And I have found in the ways that I have been using it in my classroom, it has been really helpful. So I think the stress and the mental health and the wellness of the kids that I'm seeing is something that's a priority for me. And finding this balancing act of course, insisting on high standards and insisting on the best from our kids, but allowing for some breathing room in the timeline of how we get there, and asking them to meet our expectations, so that there's room for them to also, I think, have some breathing room in our classes, especially in performing arts classes, where the kids get to let go of, hopefully, some of the stress of the other parts of their day. And I think just being more intentional about that part of it, that music making is a place for them to de-stress and decompress. I almost said decompose, decompress from the other parts of their day. But then I also think another significant challenge is that their time is more divided in a way that feels different than it did when I was starting my career, and certainly when I was in high school, and that the divisions for their time are even more substantial, because how our time was divided, maybe the divisions were similar, but the pressures within each of those divisions were not like I think they are now. And that is something that I am concerned about for music education, because if kids and parents aren't finding value in the time that they're spending in our classrooms, then they will choose to go somewhere else and put limited available energy into other pursuits. And so the way that I've really focused on that challenge is by making sure that our band program is a place where kids want to be, where they feel like if they're not there, they're missing out. And that is by, helping to build a really incredible community and culture and an environment in the program where the kids care for one another in a way that I think is wholly unique to almost any other part of their band experience. And I know this is true because I hear the kids say it over and over again.
If I could give you a time machine and set it to the day of your high school graduation, what advice would you offer yourself?
Oh, wow. I would give 18-year-old me a hug and tell him he's going to be okay. And honestly, I would probably look him in the eye and let him know that exactly who he is and where he is at is fine. He's going to be fine. I think there was so much in my teenage brain that was scared and afraid to know and understand who I was and what world I was moving into. And I would just want to let him know that he was going to make it all right.
Yeah, that answer transcends what my typical band answers are, and I appreciate that.
Yeah.
So, Jonathan, if you had a choice, what would be the final work for wind ensemble or band that you would want to conduct or perform?
That's a great question. When I read that, I really reflected and thought about it for several days, actually. And so I went to my retirement concert, and I was like, well, what do I want on that retirement concert, right? And the piece I came back to, and I've had the joy of conducting this 2 times with my ensemble at Amador in my time there, is Lincolnshire Posy. And the piece for me is, I mean, in the way that any band person would know, it's like kind of the epitome of like a masterwork for band in multiple ways. But for me, it resonates because it's the intersection of intellectual and artistic arriving in this perfect package of 6 movements, each with its own personality. And I feel like in our ensembles, we have so many characters, and I love that Lincolnshire Posy has so many characters. And I feel like it's music, but that's also a mirror of humanity and different kinds of personalities. And there's something for everybody in that piece. And also, it's just a boatload of fun to conduct, except for the 3rd movement. That's just stressful. But I feel like you conduct the 3rd movement and you get to the end of it, and then the 4th movement is your payoff in making it through the 3rd as a conductor. But Lincolnshire Posy would be my choice.
All right, Jonathan. So the next question is there anything coming up that you would like to share or promote? But you've got Midwest in 3 weeks.
So yeah, y'all, come and check us out. A bunch of cool kids from California.
Excellent. Will you have your surfboards with you?
Yeah, I know. I always tell the kids, people will ask you funny questions when you're from California, like, do you surf to school and do you know famous people? And the answer in the Bay Area to both of those things is no.
Right. Absolutely. All right, Jonathan, thank you so much. I really appreciate your time, and I appreciate your humanity. How can people get in touch with you?
Well, Mark, I have also had an incredible time chatting with you today, and thank you for the invitation and the opportunity to be a part of your very esteemed podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I keep a semi-active blog on WordPress called The Accidental Expert, and kind of lessons on life on and off the podium. So if people want to check out my blog, they're able to do that. And then I'm on social media. I'm on all the platforms. So anybody who wants to connect there, I'm pretty generous with a follow and a follow back. So we'd be happy to connect with any of your listeners on social as well.
Excellent. Jonathan, thank you so much.
Thanks, Mark. It's been an honor.